you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Playing on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Playing on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-k.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. The Eye Test with Pierre, McGuire, and Jimmy Murphy.
The Stanley Cup winning Colorado Avalanche. And after 22 years, Raymond Moore
The sickest NHL podcast. It's gonna be sick.
And welcome to another summer edition of the Eye Test here on the Sick Podcast Network. And this is the last summer edition of it. We will be going back to the Daily Show next week, so looking forward to that. Pierre, McGuire, Jimmy Murphy here, and we've got a great guest lined up. Our friends at the Sick Podcast Network definitely know who our next guest is because he is the main star here, and that is Tony Marinaro. He is joining us now here on the Eye Test. Tony, how you doing, my friend?
Gentlemen, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Guy's a world traveler. He's all over the place. We corralled him for one afternoon.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm happy to be back.
Tony on French radio now in Montreal. Tony, for those that don't know, tell them about your new gig there.
Yeah, absolutely. So today was day 3 after a 27-month hiatus from hosting my own radio show. I'm now hosting Le Forum on BPM Sports Radio, Quebec's all-French sports radio station. And once again, I'm on between, technically it's 9:55 a.m. to 11:55 a.m. I'm used to saying 10 to noon, but it actually starts at 9:55 a.m. So I'm happy to be there, gentlemen. To tell you the truth, I thought at one point that, and this is the truth, that when I walked away from radio, I was living a great life. It was a very comfortable life, and several things motivated me to come back. One of which was I thought that I was maybe still a little bit too young to get so comfortable. So I decided to start working a little bit harder again. And make no doubt, I mean, even though we started up the podcast network just over 4 years ago, and that was a big challenge at the time, doing this in a language which is now my second language, but up until 3 years ago, probably was the third language that I used the most. It's the biggest professional challenge of my career. And that's another reason why I wanted to do it.
Awesome.
So I'm happy to be doing it.
Congratulations, Tony.
Thank you.
I'm sure the people.
Jimmy, one more thing.
Yeah.
He's underselling himself. He's back from Europe because he was watching his son sign a pro contract to play soccer over in Europe. And I think that's
wow, I did not know that.
Congratulations.
Well, congratulations to him as well. That's
Yeah.
great, Tony.
And considering all the money I invested for him to get to that point, that's another reason why I took on more work so I could pay it back.
Yeah, it's every hockey parent. Yeah, every hockey parent knows that too. It's not just hockey. It's many sports. Tony, obviously, right before you start up again, the Canadiens make some huge news last week, bringing in Patrick Laine in a trade. Just your initial thought, I guess, last week when it happened, and has your opinion or your views of that trade changed a bit since then?
No, they haven't really. Now, it goes without saying that I like offense, right? I've mentioned this before, but my first sports idol was the great Guy Lafleur. And to think I was born in 72 and I saw Lafleur when he was way on the decline. I didn't see him in the best years of 76, 77, 78. But I do have a memory of my dad screaming in 79 when he tied the game up at 4 versus the Bruins. But Lafleur had that it factor. So he was my very first idol growing up, a Montreal Canadiens fan. Several years later, it became Stéphane Richer, who was the last Montreal Canadiens player to score 50 goals. He did it twice in a 3-year span. So because I was raised loving offensive players, I obviously like this. Patrick Laine, Grant McCagg sent over some stats to me a couple of weeks ago, which actually was Stéphane Leroux from RDS who put this one up. But Patrick Laine is 4th all-time in the history of the National Hockey League for the most goals under the age of 20, ranked number 4. I'm sure you wouldn't be surprised to know that Wayne Gretzky's number 1 on the list. But, Patrick Laine has had a season of over 40 goals and a couple of seasons of over 30 goals. And the last 5 seasons has been a struggle. He averages 18.8 goals per season, and he's gone into slumps, and he's had his fair share of injuries. But if you average out games played and goals scored, they would amount to an average of a 30-goal season. And the season before those 5 seasons, he actually scored 30 goals. So the guy can score goals. It's the toughest thing in hockey to teach, is to teach someone how to score goals. He obviously knows how to do it. He's got one of the heaviest shots in the National Hockey League. At the same time, we need to be realistic. And I brought this up with Pierre. Players who come out of the Players Assistance Program, more often than not, fail to produce at a rate that they did before going in. Pierre brought up Thier and Fleury as one example of players who were able to rediscover themselves once they came out of the program. I know Jonathan Drouin obviously had a good season last year in a much less pressure environment in Colorado and playing alongside Nathan McKinnon. But, it's fine for Patrick Laine to say that he wants to get back to scoring 40, maybe 50. That's awesome to hear. I just hope that he doesn't put too much pressure on himself, and I hope that others don't put too much pressure on himself either, because it's already going to be a very tough task to do it in the most pressure-packed environment in the entire National Hockey League, Montreal.
I agree 100%. Jimmy, the big thing about Tony, he's so plugged into the Canadiens management group, their coaching staff, and a lot of their scouting staff. Tony, what was the thinking behind Laine? Was it just offense, or was it somebody to play with Kirby Dach? Was it somebody that was bigger? Usually when you make a trade like this, there's one key element to why they made the trade. Was there one element, you think?
Well, the one element is that they don't score enough goals to get you into the playoffs. So at that point, you're looking for guys who can put the puck in the net, and you're also looking at trying to acquire that player without having to give up a lot. I mean, as unfortunate as it is that Patrick Laine entered the Players Assistance Program, had he not entered the Players Assistance Program, the Canadiens were not going to be able to get him and a second-round pick in return for Jordan Harris. They're going to be able to pay it. They have LTIR, of course, so they're one of the few teams in the National Hockey League that can pay it. Also, if it doesn't work out, they don't really have to use that cap space in order to go out and get someone else, because it's not like the Montreal Canadiens are going to be a cup contender in the next 2 years anyway. So let's be honest. Also, I think the term is important. 2 years is over, and just like that, it goes by very, very quickly. So I think they look at it as a low risk, high reward. The other thing that can go wrong is that maybe he negatively affects your dressing room, but I think that if that would happen, the dressing room would be maybe not a strong one to begin with. Pierre is someone who's told me that before. Craig Button has brought that up as well. When something is able to affect your locker room, it's because your locker room wasn't strong enough to begin with. I think they have a pretty strong locker room. They got some young leaders, but they also got some big-time leaders in Gordon, Hughes, and Marty St. Louis. So to answer your question, Pierre, the first thing has to be just to add offense, plain and simple. They don't score enough.
Yeah.
See, Jimmy, I think this was also a big pat on the back for Marty St. Louis, and I love what Tony just said, because I don't think you make that deal if you got a coach that doesn't want to work with a project.
Right.
I don't think the GM says, I'm not comfortable, or the owner. The owner's got to pay the bill.
Yep.
You know what? I'm not comfortable. I don't know if this can work. But I think they have so much faith in Marty St. Louis. They saw what he did with Cole Caulfield. They've seen the growth of Nick Suzuki, and I think they're comfortable bringing this player into this environment because of the head coach.
Jimmy, if I can add, I had Kent Hughes on BPM Sports Radio yesterday, and I played a clip from Serge Savard, who a couple of weeks ago at his golf course, Le Mirage, was honoring the Montreal Canadiens team that won 4 cups in a row, 76, 77, 78, 79. And Serge said if there's one thing that scares him a little bit is he thinks the Canadiens need to add size. Now, having said that, he made that comment before the Canadiens added Patrick Laine.
Right.
And I would agree with that assessment. Yeah, it's true that Nick Suzuki is thick and he's hard to move. But the fact of the matter is that Suzuki 5'11", Newhook 5'11", Gallagher 5'9", Caulfield 5'7", Harvey Pinard 5'9", and you're going to add a 5'9.5" Lane Hudson. That's not a big team. Now, adding Slavkovsky a couple of years ago obviously gives another dimension. Like Serge Savard said, you go out and you get Patrick Laine. Now, think about this for a second. You can possibly put together a line of 6'4" Slavkovsky with 6'4" Kirby Dach and 6'5" Patrick Laine. Now, it doesn't look like they're going to start the season that way because Kent Hughes says he imagines they're going to start with Suzuki, Caulfield, and Slavkovsky. Dach will play center on a second line with Laine. So now we have to see who that famous number 6 is going to be in the top 6. But Patrick Laine coming over at 6'5", that's definitely another reason why they added a player like that. They need size on this team.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
One other thing, Tony, I want to build off that. And this is really important. I think the biggest thing when I think about this trade, we don't talk enough about Kirby Dach. So there are not a lot of tandems in the league that are this big when you talk about Dach and the potential for having Laine there. I think the Canadiens see something in there that's really positive, Jimmy. And Tony just touched on it. They need size. And I think that's going to be one of the things to watch for at the beginning part of the season. That twosome and whomever the third player is on that line and how they adjust to one another. I think that's going to be one of the big things to start the season for Montreal.
Yeah, Jimmy, when Pierre and I talked, as early as yesterday and even a couple of weeks ago, we talked about finding ways to score goals, because Pierre has said if they don't score 250 goals, they can forget about the playoffs. And if they want to give themselves a chance, a real chance, they need to score 250 minimum. Perfect. So how can you do it? Obviously, Kirby Dach, who was injured last year and only played 4 periods, if he's healthy, that's going to give you a shot in the arm. And then you look for a better season from Caulfield, who scored 28. He's got the potential to be in the 30s, maybe even 40s. You look for more from Slavkovsky, who took a step forward last year and he scored 20. Another thing is the power play. This power play traditionally over the last several years, maybe even in the last decade, has been one of the 5 worst power plays in the National Hockey League. They always finish near the bottom. Yeah. Patrick Laine is a huge power play weapon, And what I'm encouraged about, and I do have some concerns vis-a-vis Laine, and the biggest one being the pressure that is Montreal. We'll see, only he knows how he's going to be able to respond to the pressure. But the one thing I like is Laine came off some difficult seasons in Columbus, correct?
Very difficult.
His best seasons were in Winnipeg, correct?
Mm-hmm.
In Winnipeg, the centerman passing him the puck, they were right-handed shots. He was setting up on the left side. And who are the top 2 centermen for the Montreal Canadiens? A right-handed shot Suzuki, a right-handed shot Kirby Dach, and I think there's more of an opportunity here to succeed in Montreal than there was in Columbus.
Yep, great observation. The other thing, too, I'll say about Winnipeg, and I was going to go there, Tony, as well, but the other thing about Winnipeg, too, was a Canadian market. He's been in a, with all due respect to Columbus, nothing compares to a Canadian market and the pressure you face. Now, it's not as much pressure as he's going to face in Montreal, but he had his best years in a diehard hockey market. So I wonder, too, did that feed him? Did that help his passion more when he was there? And did he maybe lose a bit of it when he left? And can that get reignited in Montreal?
All right. So I got an interesting take for you. I completely understand your question, but I want to throw something to Pierre, who's had a chance to coach in this league, obviously, at the highest level and alongside some fantastic coaches. Pierre, I hear that, and it makes sense to me. But at the same time, I think we can't always blame other people. And I think now we have to take a look at Patrick Laine. NHL players are supposed to be self-motivated. Professional athletes are supposed to be self-motivated. I understand that probably it's more exciting to play in a Canadian market if you're a professional hockey player. But if you're playing in less of a hockey market, isn't it up to you to get motivated?
Well,
Pierre?
Of course.
100%.
But some people don't. That's just the way it is. You know?
Tampa's a good example. Back when John Tortorella took Tampa over, they were a floundering group. People forget that. There's a reason why they had #1 overall for Vinny Lecavalier. They weren't very good. John did a good job getting those guys to understand how intense you have to be to win all the time. It's kind of like, and I love what Tony just said, by the way, Jimmy. It's kind of like when Daryl Sutter went to LA.
Yes.
He implemented certain rules. And those rules, if he didn't have good guys around the team, like Tony said, that are self-motivated, those rules would have blown up and they wouldn't have had any success. Trust me. But you have Ante Kopitar, you have Dustin Brown, you have Robin Regeer, you got Drew Doughty, you got guys, Mike Richards, Jeff Carter, guys that want to win. So they're going to buy into those rules. It's just like the guys in Tampa bought into the rules that Tortorella was selling. And I think the guys in Montreal will buy into what Marty's selling. I think here's my only concern. If you look at Laine and who he was traded for, not from Montreal to Columbus, but from Winnipeg to Columbus, it's Pierre-Luc Dubois. They were both the same.
Yeah.
They weren't self-starters.
Yeah.
Neither guy's a self-starter.
No.
So now they have to buy in. Hey, look, it's not going to be Spencer Carberry's going to implement really hard rules in Washington. I can tell you that right now. And I think Marty's going to do the same thing in Montreal. So
having said that, Pierre, if they were self-starters, they wouldn't have been traded to begin with. I mean, I think people have to understand here that Patrick Laine obviously is not perfect. If he would have been, he wouldn't have been available. Now, a lot of people in Montreal and a lot of Montreal Canadiens fans, and there's a certain sector of them, really wanted Pierre-Luc Dubois. And obviously, since Pierre-Luc Dubois has been dealt twice since then, it obviously hasn't worked out for Pierre-Luc Dubois. The consolation, I guess, is, and everyone's hoping it works out for Laine, if he doesn't, at least you don't have 5 or 6 years more left on the contract. You only have 2, and 2 is going to go by quickly. And you know what? Josh Anderson's got 3 years left on his deal. Brendan Gallagher's got 3 years left on his deal. Christian Dvorak and Yoel Armia have 1 year left on their deal. And I think that, with all due respect to any of these players, that when their contract is over, they will no longer be with the Montreal Canadiens, and they're going to open up to other players. Now, I want to go somewhere with you guys because it was part of my radio show today. And that is, Kent Hughes says he imagines Suzuki, Caulfield, and Slafkovsky will start the season. Makes total sense to me, right? They say if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So you don't have to fix this. Kirby Doc says plays his best hockey at center. And I think everyone believes that Patrick Laine will play with him. So now who's going to be the number 6? And there's different theories on this. And I'm going to tell you who the candidates are, right? So I threw this out there on the airwaves. And I threw it out to my colleague, Alex Langto. So Alex starts talking about Newhook. Then he says he'd love to see an opportunity for Joshua Roy. Why not even an opportunity for Barry Boulet? And so I'm looking at him, and I totally understand everything he's saying. And look, to be honest with you, I think it's going to ultimately be Newhook that's going to start the season. Having said that, don't you find it interesting that no one will say Josh Anderson? No one. He's coming off a really bad year. He had 9 goals. He struggled with consistency. His confidence was shattered. The way I look at it, and I'm not saying that this is going to work out, by the way, because I have some concerns too. But I want to ask Pierre this question again, because I'm sure he's had so many of these experiences dealing with players in this situation. Pierre, you have a player who last year, his confidence was shattered to the point where members of the media were asking him if he was thinking of working with a mental performance coach because his teammate Yoel Armia did, and it did wonders for him. And Josh Anderson said, no, I don't believe I need that. If the coach starts the season with Doc, Laine, and doesn't give it to Anderson and gives it to another player, how worried would you be that Anderson starts the season already not feeling good about himself, and it could probably negatively impact his performances for the entire season? Is that a possibility in your opinion?
I think anything's possible, but I would say this. If you're going to do something like that, you got to create the scenario where you illustrate to the player other players that have taken a step back and it's actually benefited them. So I'll use an example. When St. Louis won the Stanley Cup in 2019, Alexander Steen went from being a first-line right wing to a fourth-line right winger. And, you know, he played with Oscar Sundqvist and Ivan Barbashev. And that line made as big a difference as any line St. Louis the whole season, especially in the playoffs. So there are ways to illustrate it to the player where it's not a demotion. It's actually accepting your role and making a difference for the team. And most players, especially guys like Josh that have been around Tony, those guys get that you have to have at least 3 lines going every night and probably 4 once you get to the playoffs if you're going to win. And so if you're still getting, let's say if Josh's case, 12 to 15 minutes a game, I don't think he's going to complain. I don't think it's going to be a knock on his psyche. Now, that depends on how the coaches deal with it, though. And I don't think this coaching staff will have a hard time dealing with that. No.
And guys, I'll say too, you know, I'm looking over here too. They're saying, yeah, let him play in a specific role. That's Marco Larabi over there in our comment section. Maybe kill penalties, slowly build his game up. This is a chance, as Pierre is alluding to, it's a chance when a player gets sent down like that, as long as you have the right conversation with him and you approach it right in practice, it gives guys a chance really to reinvent themselves. Yeah. Maybe Josh Anderson, we knew once before from Columbus, he might be gone, but the guy can still play hockey. He knows the game. Maybe he finds a different niche on the team and starts getting a new role there.
Hey, I'm going to date myself here, but I'm going to give you guys an example, okay? We had a pretty good team in Pittsburgh, 91 and 92, even 93. And Jaromir Jagr was a pretty good player. I think you would all agree. He was a pretty good player. So there were nights where Jaromir would be taken off of Ronnie Francis's line, which was his second line, and put on the third line where he played with Troy Loney and Brian Trottier. And the reason why Scotty was doing that, or Bob Johnson did that, the late Bob Johnson, was to create mismatches for the opposition and drive them nuts. And I remember once coaching in a playoff game, I was running the D, Scotty was running the forwards, and the coach on the other bench looked over and he just goes, I surrender. No mas. So,
Wow.
he did. I will not tell you the coach's name, but I can tell you that team won 11 straight games to win the Stanley Cup. No team did it before, and no team's done it since.
But
and I can just tell you,
yeah,
I'll never forget this coach looking over, his arms are crossed like this, and he just goes, no mas.
Was it Roger Nielsen with the towel on him?
No, that was
no,
Vancouver.
Yeah.
Roger was coaching the Rangers when we beat them 3 straight.
But guys, I'll say this, okay? And I just threw out a question there. I have no problem at the end of the day who it's going to be. I mean, I don't have any shares in the team. But here's the deal. I think you can take a positive and a negative of every single player and either try and make a case for them or against them. I'm going to give you an example, okay? Josh Anderson, he doesn't have the hockey sense or he just won't be a compliment to those guys. And that could be your negative, or maybe he doesn't deserve it, or maybe you just don't feel it. But the positive could be that the Canadiens can have a very big and very heavy line if he plays a 6'3" Anderson, who's tough to move. Of course, 6'4" Kirby Dach, 6'5" Patrick Laine. Anderson can go in the corners. He can dig the puck out. They can cycle along the boards. That's the negative could be 3 right-handed shots. I get that. Yoel Armia, the negative could be 3 right-handed shots. The positives could be he's a fellow Finn playing with Laine. Maybe there's some chemistry there. And the other positive could be final year of his contract. You put him in a position to succeed. He picks up points. You raise his value. You could probably get something for him. But, Joshua Roy, if you put him there, maybe too much too soon for a young player, maybe too much pressure on him, probably won't be able to pull it off. Barry Boulet, so much of the same. Yeah. I think the most obvious choice is probably Newhook because he's a left-handed shot. He can help Kirby Dach, who struggles on faceoffs from time to time, maybe insulate him in that respect. He's got speed, and if Laine doesn't get back, maybe he can cover. But, I think it's an interesting question. I think it's a really interesting question.
Hey, Tony, I want to throw this by you because you'd have more of a knowledge base of this than Jimmy would. Remember Mike McPhee?
Of course.
Why can't Josh Anderson be Mike McPhee?
I think a lot of people are hoping he's not Mike McPhee because he makes $5.5 million per year, and he will for the next 3 years. But I know exactly what we're talking about. The line of Skrulin, McPhee, and Lemieux was as important to the Canadiens when they won the Stanley Cup in '86 as Matt Naslund and Bobby Smith were.
So that's all I'm saying. So I wanted, and Jimmy, Tony knows because he was there to watch it, and I can just tell you right now, Mike McPhee. You ask Bob Gainey, you ask Larry Robinson. You ask any of the people that were around the group, Mike McPhee was probably the most underrated guy around that group. He probably was.
I remember McPhee.
I'm not saying that Josh Anderson's going to be able to do that, but you can mold your game after a guy. And I think that's the kind of game he needs to mold.
I love this. So I have a question for you. Perfect. And I love it, by the way. Shane Corson wasn't a 4th-line guy with the Canadiens. So I'll ask you a question. Why can't Josh Anderson be Shane Corson? And if you tell me that he doesn't have it, I'll buy that. I'll accept that.
No, first of all, he's a better skater than Shane.
Okay.
I don't think he has a hockey sense that Shane had. Shane had tremendous hockey sense.
Got it.
And this is I think they both were dynamic physical players. I think Anderson still can be a dynamic physical player, but he doesn't strike the fear of God into you like Shane could. Oh, yeah. Shane was I was there one night in Toronto. He fought Ty Domi, and he gave Ty everything he can handle. And I'm friends with Ty, and I respect the heck out of Ty. But I'll never forget being there that night, and that was like Shane Corson could go toe-to-toe with anybody. And in those days, that mattered in the NHL. It doesn't matter as much now, but I don't think Josh has the same hockey sense as Shane.
I remember that Shane did it with his mom and his sister in attendance, and Ty was dragging him around the ice, but Shane was able to deliver a big punch at the end, which put Ty down. But I can buy that, and I can accept that. So I have a question for you, Pierre, again, if I can. What happened to the Josh Anderson who 5 years ago scored 27 goals with the Columbus Blue Jackets? I don't think you scored 27 goals in the National Hockey League by fluke, do you?
No, you don't. And part of what got him those 27 goals, his get up and go was phenomenal.
Yeah.
His ability to create off the rush was second to none. And rather than hitting posts like he did a lot last year, he was going posting in rather than posting out. And sometimes that's just a little bit of hockey luck. But that being said, no, I don't think it's luck. If you get over 20 goals in the league, I don't think it's luck.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of their games in those days. I did a lot of Columbus games, and he's really good. I mean, there were two guys that really stood out on that team. Forget the defensemen, which were always good in Columbus. It was Boone Jenner who stood out, and it was Josh Anderson. Those were guys that really stood out on those Columbus teams.
So some will say that, look at Anderson, it didn't work out last year with Suzuki and Caulfield, right? But I'll say I probably didn't expect it to work out because I think Suzuki and Caulfield have huge hockey IQ, and I think that they're players that can play east-west and are very good at it. I think Josh Anderson obviously has less hockey IQ, and he's more of a north-south player. So my question to both you gentlemen is, having said all that, isn't there more of a chance of it working out? And I get that it's 3 right-handed shots, and that's a very, very legit point why it won't work out. But is there not more of a chance that it could work out with Doc and Laine, where I think it could be more north-south than Suzuki and Caulfield were?
Go ahead, Jimmy.
No, I think you're right. And one thing, sorry, I was just kind of looking up his playoff stats. I just remember that year, that just on Anderson there, when the Bruins beat them in 6 games in the second round. I believe it was the year the Bruins went to the Cup against St. Louis. Pierre, I'm sure he probably did the series. I just remember talking to Bruins players heading into that series and the fear they had of him coming down that wing on them. And I'm with you guys. You kind of, where did all that go? Can he find it again? Because if he gets that going again, his game's going to change. He's going to really become effective. So I just wanted to put that in there. But I like this idea. If I was doing, why not try anything in the beginning of the season? You know, why not? I would put him there.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of hockey history. Scotty Bowman had a really good right-hand shot that he always played on the left side. It was Brendan Shanahan. And he recognized one thing on tape, that Brendan would stop moving his feet and he's waiting for all the centermen and the other winger to make plays. So Brendan would be the last guy up the ice. And he didn't want that. He needed Brendan to be more aggressive, especially because of his size and his hitting ability.
Yep.
So he moved him over to the right side on his strong side. And he said, now you got to dictate the pace of the game. You're not just going to come in getting one-timers, off a feed from Fedorov or a feed from Larionov. You're going to skate and get the puck. And it did. And it really helped Detroit. And I would say that with Josh Anderson, the difference between him and Brendan is Josh Anderson can't shoot one-timers like Brendan Shanahan. So it's to Tony's point. If he goes in a straight line and he's told, you're going to be the first guy in the puck, and then we're going to generate off the cycle, that can work, Tony.
Pierre, I would be really happy if he goes on the off wing. He gets that puck. He tries to take D one-on-one. He lowers the shoulder. He puts the head down. He probably sticks out his arm like that, and he just goes to the net every single time. He's probably not going to score, but it's probably going to lead to a couple of penalties and a couple of power plays for the Montreal Canadiens. But Jimmy, you asked the question. I'm going to answer it. And you said, why not? Okay, so even though I brought it up as a possibility, why not? Well, the why not could be, it's Marty St. Louis' job to win hockey games, and he wants to get this team in the playoffs. And if he thinks another player is going to give him a better chance of winning hockey games on that line, that's the why not, right?
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. Tony, before we let you go, I want to switch gears here a bit. Pierre and I were talking about this earlier on the phone today. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the whole Jeremy Swayman thing.
Yes.
And the recent interview he had with a podcast out of Boston, where he brought up paving the way. Like, he looks at this contract negotiation right now as paving the way for goalies like him coming up the ranks. And, the salary cap's going to go up, and I need to pave the way for them and really make it. We have a sound clip here. I want you guys to listen to it, and I want to get your reaction.
In a big point in your career with a big contract negotiation going on right now, no one else really knows what this is like. Your first, presumably, longer contract. What is that like from an athlete's perspective?
If you were to ask me that same question a year ago, I would answer it truthfully, and I would say it's scary. It's a lot of resentment towards people that want you to succeed, and when you're not getting compensated for your endless efforts and doing what you do best, It's a nerve-wracking feeling because it's your family you're fighting for. And the answer I'm going to give you this year is that I've educated myself and that I understand the business side of it all. And it's given me a complete new mindset of understanding the business and how to react to it. I understand the cap is going up and where it will be in years. I understand my comparables and how I can't ruin the goalie market for other guys that are going to be in my shoes down the line.
It's nothing I didn't even think of that.
I went to the School of Business for the University of Maine, so I love the business side of it all. And I studied it, and I love it. I'm doing classes still in Stanford, part of the NHLPA program on business. I know that these experiences I'm doing now are going to help me post-career when I want to be a businessman, when I want to talk about serious stuff, away
We'll
from
give you a
hockey.
job at sideline.
I'm in.
No worries at all.
100%.
That's special. So
Little Pat McAfee special. Whenever you're ready, come
100%.
on down.
All
Guys,
right, okay.
I just want to say he's not the first player, and I'm not just talking hockey. You're starting to hear a lot of these young players take that approach and be very aware, very educated on how their contracts can impact future contracts. So it's not just about them. They're looking at it in a union point of view. And I just thought this was a really interesting dynamic. You haven't heard an NHL player say that in a long time.
Pierre?
Go ahead, Tony.
Okay, so I'll say this, right? And I'm a little bit torn here because there are goalies that make a lot of money that have been to the Stanley Cup final in the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Carey Price, highest paid player on his team, went to a Stanley Cup final. Vasilevsky made a lot of money, not the highest paid player on his team, but went to a Stanley Cup final 3 years in a row, I believe, 2 cups,
Yep.
then lost once. And of course, Bobrovsky, who just won the Stanley Cup. So it shows that if you have a goalie making a lot of money, you will get to the Stanley Cup final. But then again, you could take a look at other examples where Colorado won the Stanley Cup and their goalie didn't make as much money as Vasilevsky did. I'm going to tell you what, me personally, I wouldn't have my goalie making the most amount of money on my team. That's me if I was a GM.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Just a personal opinion. Having said that, look, he can ask for whatever he wants. He knows his worth and he can do it. I'm not so sure that if I was one of his teammates, that I would like him speaking publicly the way he did. Now, I've never been in a locker room, so I got no experience whatsoever. I don't even know if what I'm saying is true or false. But I'm not so sure I would like what he said if I was one of his teammates. Now, if he wants to say, I know what I'm worth, and I'm only going to sign if they're going to give me what I'm worth, I can respect that. For him to say, I can't negatively affect what the market is, I think that's a load of crap. I mean, come on, let's be honest. Okay, so why don't you just have somebody from the NHLPA go to negotiate your contract then? Here's the deal, okay? Some of the best players to ever play the game and some of the biggest leaders to ever lead, we've seen them in the last several years in the National Hockey League. One you know very well, gentlemen, of course, Jimmy, you in Boston, Patrice Bergeron, Pierre, Sidney Crosby in Pittsburgh. They both accepted less money to give their team a chance to win the Stanley Cup.
Yep. So is that my question? I said to Pierre, and Pierre, sorry, I'm going to cut you off there, but is that mentality changing? Not just with the Bruins, but is that something we're going to see less of across the NHL with this younger generation coming in?
I don't know, but there are a couple things just so the fans understand this. Jeremy Swayman's a really smart kid. He's well thought out. I've had a chance to visit with him a lot. I really respect him a ton.
Mm-hmm.
He lives in Boston. He's from Alaska. Went to the University of Maine, as he said. Marty Walsh, who runs the NHLPA, he's a Boston guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows him.
Okay?
He used to be the mayor of Boston. So he runs the NHLPA. So there's conversations going on. This is not a knock on anybody. This is just a background so everybody understands what's going on here. I remember the day when Byron Dafoe was the goalie in Boston. And Byron Dafoe got offered a lot of money. I think it was 3 times 3 or maybe 3 times 4. And a lot of people are telling him that's not enough. You got to hang in. You got to hold up. And he says, well, it's enough for me and my family, and I'm done moving. So I'm signing this. Mm-hmm. Well, it wasn't that he didn't respect the NHLPA. He wanted to take care of his family as well. And he thought that was more than fair market value. Jeremy said he knows the comparables. It's not hard to do. There's so many stats out there that everybody understands comparables. I don't know what he's looking for, but I would say this. He plays in a marketplace with very intense owners.
Mm-hmm.
Very intense owners. And you were talking about maybe some of the players wouldn't like what he said. I don't know how ownership would respond to what he said there in Boston.
Specifically his owner. Let's not forget who he is.
With a very intense team president too, I might add.
Yes.
So I mean, as much as but this is all background, just so everybody understands.
Yeah.
I think the kid's really good.
I think he is too.
I don't think he's a one-hit wonder. Like, I think he's really good and just getting better.
But it almost sounds like, so if I make huge salary demands and they can't meet them, I want everyone to know that I have an obligation to the PA and all the other goalies, and I'm doing this for them. Like you just said, you got to think about you, your family, where you want to play, where you love to play, your teammates, and a chance to win the Stanley Cup before you think about anybody else.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So I don't buy that, by the way. I think that's already a cop-out.
Yeah, but I want to stand up for Tony in this, because you know what? Some people that are tight to the PA are going to say, well, he was bad mouthing the PA. No, he wasn't. Not at all. He was not. No, he's just stating a personal fact. That's all. It's not anything against the PA. The PA, by the way, the NHL PA has done a magnificent job for their constituents. They have done an amazing job. They really have. My concern, he said one other thing, and this is not a shot at anybody. How does anybody know what hockey-related revenues are going to be going forward?
Thank you, Pierre.
How does anybody know that? He doesn't know what the hockey.
We don't know if the cap's going to continue to go up. We were told it would go up 2 years ago.
I was told 4 years ago the cap was going to go up to $100 million.
Yeah,
well, it's not there yet.
Yeah.
So I mean, no, I can tell you this, and I talked, just so you understand this, Tony. I talked to Jimmy about this a lot. You know, nobody's talking about the regional sports packages in the United States. It's a big problem.
Yep.
Nobody's talked about that. You know, in Seattle, Washington, their games are being broadcast on the regional NBC. They're not on a cable subscription.
Yeah.
The people in Dallas are streaming on their own.
Yep. And I think Colorado's going to do it as well.
Colorado, I think, is doing it as well. That's right, Jimmy. So, you know, so there's hockey-related revenue. And let's remember this. There's rumors about 4 expansion teams coming in. Well, expansion fees aren't hockey-related revenue based on the current collective bargaining agreement. So, you know, there's a lot here. All I would say is this. He's a really good player. I don't think the Bruins are going to shortchange him, and I believe he'll be playing for the Boston Bruins this year.
I do too. I do think this could trickle into camp a little, though.
Maybe.
You know, we're 2 weeks out, I think, so we'll see.
But what are we talking, though? Before I break away here, give me a figure. What are we talking about? How much would you give Swayman?
8 times 8. Maybe 8 times 8 times 8.5.
I'm just trying to do the math here.
And I've heard he didn't. I've heard there's no firm stance has been reported on 10 million right now. I think that was just an asking where they started, and they knew they were going to have to go down from there.
I would never give him 10 million a year.
I would never give him 10 million either.
No, so
that's no knock on Jeremy, because I'm like Pierre. I think the kid has the potential to win a Vezina, even maybe lead the Bruins to a cup. But I would not give him 10 million a year at this point.
Jimmy Korpisal's at $5 million a year, right?
Yeah, where's that money coming from too?
So my point is, if you do 10, you're at 15 million for 2 players, and only one of those 2 is going to play. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So and even at 8, it's going to be tough. But I would say I could go 8 times 8. I would be comfortable doing that.
No.
What about you, Tony?
You know, the number I had in my head was 7.5, but at this point, 7.5, 8. I mean, what's the difference, right? 500,000, right?
No, I mean,
I know this, okay? I know that Jeremy Swayman is obviously superior to Samuel Montembeault, right? Who the Canadiens acquired off of waivers years ago. I think the deal that Kent Hughes gave Montembeault, 3 years times 3.15. I think that's a terrific contract.
It's a fantastic contract.
Yeah, terrific contract.
The value,
for the player.
Yeah,
and for the team.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know what? He gets to showcase cinema every single game. So he's saying, this isn't my last contract, and my last one's going to be my big one. And so, no. And look, I know people don't want to hear this because it's down the road. Jacob Fowler is going to blow everybody away when he gets to Montreal.
Yeah.
That's the guy that they're looking to. When they're really ready to go win, he's going to be their goalie.
Yep. with you on that. Tony, always a
Yeah.
pleasure, my friend.
Thank you for
joining
having
us.
me.
I know you're a busy man.
Go get
Never-
some rest.
Never too busy to talk sports and
Yeah.
to talk Habs, my favorite subject. This is what I love to do, guys, so it's not work.
And to be with some good Sick Media teammates. So there we go.
Yes, of course. Thanks, guys.
Yes.
Continue.
Thanks,
All right,
Tony.
always
Cheers.
a pleasure.
Thank you.
Check
Bye.
out Tony. He's on 10 o'clock every night. And of course, you can find him now back on Montreal radio. Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, Pierre. Like we were saying off air now with Tony, it's a different approach from these players right now. And Tony brought up even before I got to say it, what I said to you about taking less for the team, taking less to win. The Bruins have become accustomed to that. So have the Patriots in this market as well, even the Red Sox at times. I don't know if that's going to happen anymore. I think it's, that ship might sail soon. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic to see how these younger players handle situations like Swayman's in right now after he sets the first example there.
I do think there's a lot of pressure on him. I do. I think there's a lot of different pressures. You got teammates.
And he probably just wants to play, Pierre. I know that kid.
There's only two things you can do to hurt a player. You know what they are? Take away his ice time or trade him.
Yep.
From a good situation.
Yeah. And he doesn't want that.
Why would you want that?
I can tell, for those that don't know too, he's skating right now. He can't once training camp starts if he's not signed, but he's skating at the Bruins old practice rink from what I heard with a bunch of the guys. He's been incorporating himself into the city here, into the community. He ran a triathlon. He's really become a key figure, not just on the ice for the Bruins, but also as a teammate and a leader. All those things have to be weighing on him right now.
So Donnie Sweeney, the general manager in Boston, he runs triathlons too. So
I know that's right. You're telling me
they should do a saw-off and say, okay, whoever has the best time, even though Swayman's a lot younger than Donnie and fewer miles on him, whoever has a better time, they dictate where the contract goes.
Yeah.
But I don't think they'll do that.
I hear you. Well, you know what? With all that pressure, Swayman probably needs some good sleep. And if he wants to get some good sleep, he should go over to Manta Sleep right now because, man, they make the best eye mask to darken everything up for you. You won't even know. It could be sunny and bright right around you. You'll sleep like a baby. They're the only mask designed and optimized for deepest possible sleep in any environment. 100% blackout for deeper sleep. Infinitely adjustable for personalized fit. Absolute comfort. Visit mantasleep.ca and use the code SICKET for 10% off. Again, that's SICKET, SICKET for 10% off. Pierre, both of us are already fans of it. So
I can vouch for it. My daughter travels all over. She lives in Europe. She works in Europe, and she uses it all the time, and it has not affected her sleep patterns. In fact, it's helped her sleep patterns a lot.
Yep.
So I would totally endorse the product because I can speak to it from family experience.
All right, let's get to our Q&A here with our viewers and fans. I'm sure there's a lot of questions after having Tony on. He brought a lot of good insight. All right, Cuckoo69, with top 6 player slots pretty much spoken for Montreal's third and fourth lines are looking expensive. Gallagher, Anderson, Armia for TOI. Do you see a trade still open for a possible prospect out of camp? I do.
The problem, though, is, Jimmy,
what's the value?
Those contracts are worth a lot, and I don't see Montreal wanting to digest a lot of that money. So I think it would be tough to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, though I will just say, I mean, Ken Hughes did tell Tony the other day from what I read, I'm not necessarily done, but I don't know if it would be something like that. It could be something.
No, but, people still have to expose players to waivers. They still have a lot of depth in their defense pool.
That's where it's just
different ways they can go. I just, to those players in particular, I don't think those contracts are very easy to move.
Yep, totally agree. All right, next question. Will Doc have lost a step post-ACL operation? It's always a chance, Pierre, but I don't know how his workouts and rehab went and how that's going right now, but there's always that chance. But I just got a good feeling about him. If he can stay, healthy, he's in for a big year.
That's the key, is the health. I agree.
And that could be the key to that team. It really could. He's that important to this team, and he hasn't really played much for them.
No, but he's important. I like the fact that he had a chance to really learn from Jonathan Taves and from Patrick Kane and from Duncan Keith and from Brent Seabrook. Those guys are champion humans. They're champion players. And he learned a lot from those guys. They made sure that they were working with him. I was in Chicago a lot back in the day, and those guys did a real good job with him.
Good stuff. All right, next question. Jimmy and Pierre, do you expect the Bruins and Habs to hand out some PTO contracts? Pierre, I'll just say, I don't know about the Habs, but I'll say in the Bruins, there was a report about a week or maybe 10 days ago that the Bruins were looking to bring in Blake Wheeler. I think I sent you the report, Pierre.
Yeah.
And who was the other guy? Yamamoto.
Yeah.
As well. I've been told just by a source that the Blake Wheeler thing was never true. There was no contact. So that's probably not happening unless something's changed. I was told this about 5 days ago. And I don't know about Yamamoto, but I could see the Bruins doing something for sure up front. They need a little depth on the wing.
So what I don't understand is nobody's signed James Van Riemsdyk yet. So he could go as a PTO player.
Yep.
And maybe Boston eventually brings him back. I don't know. But there's a guy out there, and I know his numbers have gone down a little bit, but Kevin Labanc was a big scorer in San Jose. He's played 7 years in the league. And I know that he's probably a PTO player this year. And I would be surprised if he didn't end up on a PTO somewhere. Kevin Labanc from San Jose.
You know, it's interesting you say that, Pierre, because I remember was it two seasons ago, the season they broke all those regular season records. And right around the trade deadline, I was talking to a person with the Bruins who had told me they've been watching him for a while at that point. I mean, this is 2 years ago now, but they had their eyes on him. I wonder, you never know. Maybe they.
I'll tell you one thing. He was a hell of a scorer with the Barrie Colts in the Ontario Hockey League. And when he broke into the league, he was a real scorer. Like opportunist, great shot, undersized guy, but he could score. I think you have to look it up, Jimmy, but I think there are only 2 players ever from Staten Island, New York, that have played in the NHL.
Yeah.
One is Kevin Labanc, and the other one is the great Nick Fotiu.
Oh, Nick Fotiu, you're right. That is it. Those are the 2.
I think those are the only 2 that ever came from Staten Island, New York, to play in the NHL.
Yep, good point. All right, next question. Charles, if the Habs are in playoff contention, will they become buyers instead of sellers? If that is the case, Habs 5 UFAs could leave after the season with no return. Yep.
First of all, Charles, great point.
Great point.
Really smart. We agree with you.
Yeah.
But they have to be realistic players. They're not going to deviate from their rebuild. They've done a really nice job. And, you know, I know some people want it to go faster. There's no speed up. I won't mention the teams because I don't want to start fights here before the season starts or training camp starts. But there are a lot of teams that try to do the short circuit on the rebuild and say, we can speed it up. We can speed it up. And then all of a sudden they take 5 steps back when the guy doesn't pan out for them and they don't make the playoffs. Montreal doesn't need to do that. They are on the right track. They really are.
You know what you're talking about this period immediately, Seattle just came to my head because let's not forget what they did in their first season. And then of course they regressed back to, you know, pretty much where they should be. Just your thoughts quick, not to deviate, but what have you thought of how they handled this offseason and sort of how they might rebound from this without veering off the path or putting too much pressure to make the playoffs again?
Well, they fired the coach.
Yep.
They brought in Danny Bylsma, changed the staff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they've changed some of the players. I think they're looking for a lot more offense. We'll see. I mean, they've got some young – I will say this. They've got some young prospects that have a chance. They do, but they're not ready. They're just not ready yet. So it's a realistic thing. You know, I trained one of their prospects. He's a really good player, but he's not ready yet.
Right.
You know, I'm just telling you, he's not.
And they got to keep that in mind, Pierre. I mean, they have to accept the reality of it, not try to rush it.
Yeah. I talked to Ronnie about it, Ronnie Francis, and he and his staff have done – he and Jason Bottrell, that whole staff have done a really good job there. They really have. They've done a great job. But people have to understand, like, you just don't throw 19 or 20-year-old guys in the NHL. They're not all Crosby. They're not all McKinnon. Mm-hmm. Most of these guys aren't ready until they're 22 or 23. They're just not.
It's true. All right, next question. Marco Lorebi. What's up, Marco? Why wouldn't Habs hold on to Dvorak if he can be had at lower number 2 years? You don't want Beck and Kapanen to be third-line center right away. You need time to adjust to the NHL, kind of building off what we just said, Pierre. Great point, Marco.
Marco always nails it. He's got really good insight and good feel. Here's the one thing I'd say. When Montreal got Dvorak, the current management team was not in place yet.
Mm-hmm.
It was a different management team. I would just say this, again, to be fair. Dvorak, it's not his fault. he's a third and fourth line player, but he's getting paid more like a second line player. And so a lot of times coaches can't worry about what the management pays the player, and the fans shouldn't either, even though that's what comes up.
Right.
So is he a useful player? Yeah, but he's overpaid for the numbers that he puts up.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the problem.
Yeah. I remember. I got to say, Pierre.
Look, I got to be transparent here. When I was in Ottawa, we had a chance to get him. And how do you do that? Like, we had to get Brady Tkachuk's deal done. We had Jake Sanderson coming along. We had to deal with Timmy Stützle. Like, you got to have a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan. And if you're not thinking along the right line, you're going to overpay some guys, and then you're going to have big problems.
Exactly. And that ties into what we were just saying on the previous question there. All right, next question. Tyler Lessier. Love the episode, Jimmy and Pierre. Thank you, Tyler. Do you guys think Montreal is close to Ottawa, Buffalo, Detroit, Boston, Islanders, Penguins, Washington, et cetera, on paper? Let's say everything goes right. Pierre, I'll let you start here because I have a little something I want to say about it after, but you go first.
I personally think there's a group. Now, the one part of the neighborhood that Montreal's in, obviously the Atlantic Division, Florida is a playoff team. Tampa, I believe, is a playoff team. Toronto is a playoff team. So that's 3 already. And now you got to say, okay, is Detroit ready to take the next step? They probably are.
Yep.
Is Buffalo prepared to take the next step? If they're not, there's going to be a lot of problems there. Is Ottawa prepared to take the next step under new ownership and a new coach? Well, if they don't, then there's going to be problems with the fans and the season ticket holders. And in Montreal, I think that they're in a really good position to continue to improve. So do I think they're in that? Yes, I do. The problem for Montreal is the neighborhood that they're in.
Yep.
They're in a very difficult neighborhood. If they were in the Metro, I'd say a lot better, but they're in the Atlantic.
Totally agree. And Pierre, it's funny. We talked about this yesterday. I was on my good friends from the Ice Guys podcast, the gambling podcast I do weekly, and doing a Boston Bruins preview. And we just kind of bouncing around the Atlantic Division, and all this came up. And I said, do you think the Bruins could be a 100-point team again? And I said, I don't see why not. But I said, one thing you got to remember, guys, is later in the season, there's going to be a mishmash of teams, the Ottawas, the Detroits, the Buffaloes, potentially the Canadiens, still alive and still battling. And those points are going to be worth something to them too. Who knows? Maybe they grab some points from other teams that they expected would be there because they're right there knocking on the door. So I think that whole group, and I include Montreal in that group right now. I don't want them to rush it, but I think they can be in that group, that sort of mishmash there knocking on the door.
I agree.
All right, next question. Vincent Urel. Evening, gentlemen. Between the three of you, has the culture of the Habs changed from reporting aspect, i.e. more polite, hostile? It seems that Hugo are a pleasure to work with.
Hughes and Gorton.
Oh, okay. Hughes and Gorton. Gotcha. I think I honestly, and this is no disrespect to any of the previous regimes in terms of how they handle the media. I think the media relations department with the Canadiens has been amazing. And that trickles down from Hughes and Gorton. I think they're all on the same page. They want to accommodate the media. They do what they have to, but they also protect their team at the same time. So I think it's really done a great job in the last few years.
Well, there's definitely been a reach out, and they've been transparent. I think Jeff has been very transparent. Kent has been very transparent. And don't forget Chantal Maccabee.
Yep.
She's done a very nice job. And part of why I think she's done such a good job, she came from
the other side.
And she knows the demands from this side,
exactly,
side, and then she also understands the importance of the brand. Here's where Montreal is a little bit different. Okay, just trying to be fair. Their brand is huge. It's a worldwide brand. It's not a regional brand. It's a worldwide brand, and it incorporates a lot when you're a worldwide brand. It's like the New York Yankees. It's hard. It's like Liverpool and soccer. It's different. It's like Chelsea. So you got to be aware of that when you work for the team. And I think for a few years that got away from them.
Yeah.
It was too adversarial. It's not adversarial anymore. I think they're really on the same page and they've done a good job with it.
All right. I'm getting a heads up here that we have to do a rapid fire because we're pressing up against it and we got a lot of questions. So let's go. Alex Ivanowski. Today on The Athletic, the Red Wings prospects pool was ranked all the way down at 14. There feels like there's growing frustration in the fan base and maybe some writers are turning against Stevie. I've heard some stuff from my media friends I'm not going to say who, and just kind of off the record saying, all right, enough of this Eisman plan. Maybe they got to get it this year. Or maybe they got to look in a different direction. I've heard that, Pierre. I don't agree with it. I think they're doing a good job, but I do agree that there are some whispers out there, so to speak.
Well, they haven't played a playoff game in, I think, 9 years. So it's pretty substantial. One of the things that hurt them last year, the health of Dylan Larkin. They got to keep Dylan Larkin healthy the entire year. And I believe if Dylan Larkin can play 75 to 82 games, I believe Detroit will make the playoffs. I really do. I think Steve's done a really good job there. And by the way, I'd have their prospect pool rated higher. Steve's the general manager, and Chris Draper's in charge of scouting with Sean Horkoff, and I think they've done a really good job in the scouting department.
Pierre, I mean, I love what they're doing there, and look at the guys they have coming too. They still have guys coming.
Yeah, I know a lot of their players. They're in good shape. Don't worry.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about them. All right, let's go. Next question. I can see Tampa taking a step back this year. I mean, no Stammer, no Sergachev. I think they're in for a fight to make the playoffs. Thoughts? That's an interesting team. And on that show I was on yesterday, same thing was going on where they were saying, what's with Tampa? What do we think of them? They went out and got Gensel. You got to think Vasilevsky's motivated after last year. I don't count them out, and I never will until I really ever I don't count them out.
They lost Sergachev, but they got Ryan McDonough.
And they got Ryan McDonough back. Huge guy.
I'm just going to tell you, I know a lot of people rating Tampa off. Jake Gensel is going to pop a bunch there. I mean, he's not going to pump like 3 or 4. He's going to pop a bunch of goals.
Yep.
And Ryan is a leader, and he's a known commodity. He understands John Cooper. I think Tampa is going to be a little bit better than some of the pundits are saying. And if we're wrong, we'll say it.
Yep, we'll admit it. All right, next question. Brandon Parker, feels like the scoring will come if the Habs can stay healthy. Do you think this is beneficial for Anderson not being relied on now for primary scoring as much? Thanks again, guys. Love the pod as always. Great point, Brandon. Brandon, you're absolutely right.
So this is exactly what we talked about with Tony. Brandon's spot on. Like, I see him playing either deeper in the lineup and just be Mike McPhee. Like, give him an example of what he needs to be.
Yep.
And if he can do that, it's great.
Awesome. And that's what it's like saying before too, Pierre. Okay, the guy hasn't been playing up to his contract, up to his cap hit, but maybe he can. And maybe you need to find a different role. Make him valuable in some way he wasn't before.
The great Scotty Bowman used to call it apple polishing. Polish the apple.
Not on the level of McPhee, but remember Marty Lapointe in 2004 with the Bruins? Yeah. I know they lost in the first round of Canadiens, but I mean, I just remember talking to those guys, specifically Patrice Bergeron. He became a leader. He became a great defensive player again, and he found a role on that team. And maybe he wasn't a $5.5 million player, but he still found a good role.
Let me just give you one line, and it's easy for all the fans, the grind line. Mm-hmm. When you had Draper and Maltby and McCarty.
Oh, God.
Say, you can ask any of the star players there in Detroit. I was there doing all the games, and I can tell you right now, that grind line, they made a difference every single night. And were they getting more ice time than Yzerman? No. Shanahan? No. Larionov? No. Fatisa? Like all those guys. They weren't getting more ice time than any of those guys.
No.
They made a difference every single night.
Yep, for sure.
Anderson's got to be sold on.
Yeah. All right, next question. Marco Larabia, wouldn't Zadina be a good bet for cash-strapped teams like the Pens and the Leafs? I don't know what my opinion is.
I don't usually disagree with
you. You can go.
I'm going to say no.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning that way too, and it's no.
And I feel bad. I don't like to beat up on any kid. I don't see it.
Yeah.
I didn't see it as draft year, so again, going to be totally transparent. Didn't see it as draft year, and I haven't seen it since.
Yeah, I mean, I hope the kid picks it up and he finds a home. We'll see. Yeah. All right, next question. Tyler Lessier, why did it take so long for Montreal to look at how their team was and decide to get into a full rebuild? I never understood why they continued to stay mediocre with no talent besides Price.
Well, Tyler, you got to remember, it's a different management group. The general manager had been there 10 years or a little bit more. They thought, and again, this was not anybody's fault, but they did go to a Stanley Cup final, and it was fictitious.
Yeah.
And it was fictitious because it wasn't a real playoff, and it was just a different deal. It was different. It didn't mean that they weren't a good team. It was just different.
Yeah.
And so I think they kind of overhyped their group, and then they realized, uh-oh.
Yeah. They caught lightning in a bottle, and then they realized it wasn't there anymore. That's what happened. Yeah. All right, next question. Randy Workman, can Lindholm get back to 80 points this season?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
He can. The only difference is, Randy, this is important because I know you're a Calgary guy. Matthew Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau, the year that Lindholm was doing that, those guys, that was the best line in the NHL that year. I was there a ton. I saw them play a ton. And he was a guy that helped drive the line, but Matthew was off the charts good, and Johnny Gaudreau was bringing the heat every night.
Yeah, I want to say, too, about Pasternak. Watch him. I think he's up for another great big year. He had some interesting comments saying, Pierre, how the winning the gold at the Worlds really fueled him. So, and
how he was a superstar at the World. He was unbelievable. Yeah, no, great point, Tony. I totally agree. Yep.
All right, next question.
Did I call you Tony?
You did. I'm not that good looking. Come on.
Oh, sorry about that, Jimmy.
That's because you've been doing what? You've done 2 interviews in 2 days with him, right? So that's all right. Alex Evanovsky, do you agree with the McGuire trade? It feels like maybe the Penguins should have stuck with Yeager and played the long-term game. Does McGuire really move the needle for them now? I say no. I don't know, Alex, but I really think that trade, when it presented itself to them, they must have been like, we have to do this because we are getting slammed in this market right now. We are just getting destroyed, and we don't have a lot of youth coming. We need to kind of jumpstart things here, and I think that's what it was about. And you get in a good young player, so we'll see.
The thing about McGuire is he doesn't always have to score to help you win. He's a physical, hard guy to play against. Yeager is not. Yeager's more of a scoring center iceman. Good player. Please do not get me wrong. Very good player. But I think McGuire addresses some organizational needs for them long term. And the one thing I'd say about McGuire that he does need to work on, I said this to Mark Madden yesterday in Pittsburgh, I do that show every week, is that his skating needs to get a little better.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see if they put him on a line with Sidney or with Evgeny Malkin. And if they do put him with Sidney, where do they put Drew O'Connor? Mm-hmm. O'Connor's a really good player. I think he's going to be one of those surprise players, way underrated. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch. But I do think short term, if McGuire can get stabilized quick, he can really help Pittsburgh. But if he doesn't, it's going to be a process. It's going to be.
I have a feeling that could be one of those trades, those rare trades that ends up working for both teams. I don't know.
I agree with that too, because you got to remember, Yeager's a kid from Saskatoon, actually born in Prince Albert, but grew up in Saskatoon, and he's a Western, played in Moose Jaw. He's a Western Canadian kid. Yeah. And they're not going to be intimidated by living in Winnipeg, Manitoba.
No, for sure. All right, next question. Jimmy and Pierre, did you guys happen to watch the Habs behind the scenes 2024 draft edition? Thoughts? Big Bill, I have not. I plan to still do it, but I've been seeing snippets on Twitter, and it looks really good.
I have not.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check it out.
I will tell you, Jimmy knows. Like once the draft is over and free agency is over, I'm training players.
Yeah.
So I'm not really
feeding them too, Pierre, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Poor Melanie McGuire, she's the one feeding.
God bless her.
She's good.
All right, next question. Ron LaRoque. Pierre, can a 21-year-old fourth-round drafted NHL player that had 4 major injuries before 21 make an NHL lineup eventually? Has it been done?
I don't know. That's a lot of moving parts there. But can a 21-year-old fourth-round pick make it? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think guys can make it later on in life. I think it's changed too now because younger players, even though they're older, the money really starts to kick unless you're a star player. The money doesn't start to kick till your third contract.
Yep.
So if you're a 22-year-old kid coming out of college and they don't punch you up a year and you have to do 3 years, that brings you to 25. Then your next contract is maybe 2 or 3 years. They get you to 28.
Yeah.
So, I think that's the window for a lot of these guys. So can that player make it? The answer is yes. Can I give you chapter and verse on lots of guys that have done it? No, I can't.
No. And just remember too, the amazing what they can do with rehab too, and nutrition and everything. And
it's changed. It's changed significantly.
Yeah. Sure. The recovery time's way long. Way quicker.
Yeah. Way quicker. Yeah.
All right. Next question. What is Michael Hayes' upside? Pierre,
he's got upside. No, he's got big upside. I can't wait to watch him in Michigan. Now, we talked about Rutger McGroarty. McGroarty moves from Michigan, and now he's there.
Yeah.
It's going to be a kind of an interesting deal to watch how the whole Michigan lineup reacts to what's going on there, just from losing one player.
Yeah.
but it's hard to like if you're a college coach, I can just tell you from experience, it's hard to replace guys that go play in the NHL.
Yeah.
It just is. Even though people say, well, it's one or two guys. No, it's more than you think.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder.
I like the kid though too. And what a touching moment when he was drafted there too.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I don't think the Canadiens did some really good. They've done a lot of really good things.
Yep. They
Things.
continue to. All right, next question. Chris Blue Shirts. Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. Who do you think will replace the legend Sam Rosen? Oh, that's White. We didn't bring that up. We got to get Sam on the show soon. On MSG as play-by-play man next season. Thanks. Let's go Rangers. Yeah. And I know it's not over yet, but I mean, what an amazing career for Sam. Really, he's something.
Yeah.
I remember him since I remember watching hockey. I still remember his voice always.
Sam is great. So when you used to be the assistant coach for an NHL team and you listen to the visitors' broadcasts, when you were making tapes, Sam's voice would be strongly present, especially with his great, it's a power play goal. And, you remember that. And it's a legendary, distinctive call that he has whenever the Rangers score a power play goal. I have a pretty good answer, I think. I would be absolutely shocked if it wasn't the great Kenny Albert, who was my partner for a very, very, very long time.
That makes a ton of sense.
And Kenny's been on our show, and I think the world of Kenny. I loved working with Kenny. I did a lot of big games, both NHL and international and Olympics with Kenny. I think he would be a perfect choice for the Rangers.
Yep. All right. Next question. Naz 26. Where is Shane Wright to believe he can be a good second line center?
We were just talking about Seattle, and I think Shane is one of those young players that's going to have to elevate this year. He's been to back-to-back American Hockey League finals. They haven't won. Hershey's won, but he's still been there. That's a lot of playing experience. And I think that I know Ronnie Francis is really excited about the potential for Shane Wright. And I won't give you the name of the player, but I know a guy that used to play in Seattle, and he used to take care of Shane Wright for dinners, he and his wife. And they think the world of him. They really, really like the kid a lot.
Pierre, if he doesn't make it out of camp, is that a setback or is that just the path of development?
I think that would be a setback this year.
Okay. All right. All right. We got one more question. Tyler Lussier. Also, do you guys think the Habs in the near future will be a big team? Tony talks about them being small, but some won't be there, like Robbie Bernard. And in the future, can they win what's coming?
I think they're going to be a big team.
I think they are. I think you can see it. Right.
Jordan Harris is a great kid, and he's a good team man, and he's a good player, but he's not a big guy.
No.
You look at that defense now. They're big. Outside of Laine Hudson, they're big.
Yeah.
And they skate, and they got some nasty back there. Jaden Strubal's a nasty piece of business.
Yep.
Logan Mailloux is not exactly a soft touch once he gets there. Arbor Jackey's a nasty piece of business.
Yeah.
They got some bite back there that, I don't think people realize. And up front, I think they'll just keep getting bigger. I don't think you can win with more than 3 small guys in your lineup. I really don't. They've got Cole Caulfield. They got Laine Hudson. And by small, I mean less than 6 feet, less than 190 pounds. It's hard if you got more than 3 of those guys. It's really hard.
I mean, look at all the Cup champions for like the last 10 years.
It's really hard. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Those depth guys, they don't get a lot of points for you, but they do a lot in the playoffs. They block shots. They win races. They stabilize games physically. They clear the crease. I mean, it's hard. People don't realize every night to do that for 2 months or every other night. It's a lot harder than you think.
I'm with you on that. Well, that wraps it up. We're done with the questions and the Q&A here. We appreciate all your questions and obviously watching as well. And thanks to Tony Marinaro, a Sick Media teammate, for joining us here on the Eye Test. Thanks to the production crew up in Montreal as well. And Pierre, thank you to you, my friend. When are we going to see you back in Boston?
I'll be doing the show next week from South Carolina.
Oh, okay. Going there first.
We start every day next week, right?
Yep. We're going to start up on Tuesday.
Tuesday, correct.
And there's another big thing happening with Sick Media maybe that day, but we will talk about that next week. So until then, this has been another edition of the Sick Podcast and the Eye Test here on the Sick Podcast Network.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Eye Test with Pierre McGuire and Jimmy Murphy on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.